All right. So, without further ado, after I drink my water from my Darth Vader cup, number 4, Revenge of the Sith. Now, some of you will probably be like, yo, how can you choose Revenge of the Sith over Rogue One and all the others and whatever? The reason why I like Revenge of the Sith is Rogue One was a great look into one particular battle. But one circumstance or whatever, one little snippet of history. And me as a history guy, I really enjoyed it. But Revenge of the Sith, in my opinion, is the farthest reaching Star Wars film. It's kind of the biggest scale wise. The beginning has the battle over Coruscant, which is pretty ridiculous, and the Chancellor's captured, and then you have the whole scene with Dooku and Anakin, and of course you have you have Palpatine, do his famous "do it" and all that good stuff. But probably one of the biggest things, like I said, I'm a writing type of guy, so I look at it from the writing. It's a conclusion. I'm real big on conclusions, so when you look at it, Revenge of the Sith is kind of this conclusion of that, going into like New Hope or whatnot, going into the Empire taking over. So of course you have like I mentioned earlier, you have like the Star Wars Rebels that takes place a bit after that. I'm sure, and I said it already, but if they want to do a Darth Vader movie, all right, you could have it set immediately after Revenge of the Sith and kind of chronicle his his first battle, seeking the Jedi, and going out and doing his, murking people and some of the battles and world conquering, etc. You could have that. But anyway, the big thing is Sidious. He really shines in this movie, okay? You kind of have his story arc come to the climax and close. The whole plot, like that Sith plot, is all in this. Sure, there were little things that were weak here and there, and the dialogue and all this other stuff, and especially with Anakin and like that whole thing, but you have that rise to power. And to go into like the prequels, and I've seen videos on this and articles, I've discussed it with friends, but one of the biggest things is you take all the little cheesy things aside, that plot of how a democracy / republic how you go from a democratic government / republic into a dictatorship, you see that in this film. So Lucas at least tried to reach hard and reach higher up when it comes to writing in the prequels. So I give that a lot of props, okay? More than these nostalgia, reference the old movies and all that stuff of the current movies right now. Forget about that. So these movies at least reached hard. There was originality in them with that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from an article I read, Lucas was influenced from history with, dictatorships rising and all that stuff. But I think one article or something I read was looking at Germany's history and like the Weimar Republic of the 20s going into like Nazi Germany into the 30s. So if you look at that history, it's kind of like that's pretty much exactly what he was trying to do with the prequels. So watching Sidious manipulate everyone and do that, and if you've seen the Book of Sith lying around, take a look. It's pretty fun to read. But you just have him this was my master plan and I made it happen. So it was pretty awesome. Of course, you have the famous Darth Plagueis, the tale of Darth Plagueis. That's all in there. I really like that scene too. But you have that in there. You have Obi-Wan and the Jedi, and this is the thing with the Clone Wars series, you really get a bigger picture with this. even towards the end when they have that, like, people are getting a little ticked with the Jedi, they're a little, the Republic is done with the war, like, people are sympathizing with the Separatists, all this stuff. So all this is going on, and they're really just trying to, like, snuff out the Separatists. And so with, you have that, and, what's it called? You have this anti-Jedi sentiment, and that's sentiment, I should say, and that's why Sidious kind of got away with, you know, what he did in a way, like, whatever, he didn't have consequences for those actions and stuff, but, anywho, there's a great deleted scene, and it's a shame it didn't make it to the movie, but it's with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and a few other senators, and they're just like, and Padme's there too, but they're like, hey, like, something's fishy, and there's, you know, we're gonna stand for the Republic. So that's, you know, where the rebellion kind of starts with them, right there. The Anakin kind of arc was a little weak with this. I wish they would have had. There's a deleted scene that kind of has him talking to Palpatine, and it was a little better. And they could have taken a darker tone with him turning to the dark side. With him trying to save Padme, it's kind of weird. I'm like, it just, all right, I understand, but at the same time, they could have made it stronger. They could have had him more pissed off of the Jedi. You have him not being denied master and all that other stuff, but I wish they would have had it a little bit more. I know with the Clone Wars series, you have like him getting a little ticked off with like Ahsoka leaving and being like whatever misjudged by the Jedi and all that stuff. That was a really good way to show Anakin a little fed up with the Jedi Council and everything. So you had all that stuff, and then whatever, Mace Windu's killed by Sidious. You have Sidious like kill the Jedi. I watched a YouTube. It actually explained like all this crap about Sidious like killing the others. He like used some like Sith scream technique to like stun them, and then killed like a couple of them, and then he used this other technique. Like it went into the details of like what he did to defeat them. Now Mace Windu is able to beat Sidious at first because Mace Windu invented his own style of lightsaber techniques, and so he was able to defeat him. Maybe Sidious purposely did it because he knew Anakin was coming. I don't know. I've heard everything in between, but you know, whatever, unlimited power and all that stuff. So after that, you know, you have the Yoda scene, and it's pretty ridiculous, but at least when you see it, you kind of realize, like, hey, Sidious is a pretty powerful dude if he's going up against the Grand Master of the Jedi and, like, survive / can you really say he defeated him? But he, in the end, since Yoda couldn't defeat him, Sidious wins by default. So you have him escaping, you have, like, the rebellion kind of, like, they're all formed, and the twins are born, but then, well, that's later on. Of course, you have the scene with Anakin, whatever, killing the younglings, which is pretty ridiculous. So, you know, everybody makes memes and jokes about that, but it's pretty ridiculous. The Clone Wars has a scene where Shaak Ti, Jedi Master Shaak Ti, she's in the, like I said, in the Clone Wars series, you see this like vision or whatever, but it's the lightsaber killing her. So she was killed along with a bunch of other Jedi that were at the council or at the temple, and they were killed there. So Anakin's pretty ruthless there, kills them all, and then goes to Mustafar, savagely kills the Separatists. It's pretty ridiculous, but when you look at that, it's like, from Anakin's perspective, there's been this war for years and years, and finally he just gets them all and murks them all. And he kills all them. You know, he cries like a wuss or whatever, and chokes the crap out of his wife and whatever. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, it's a little bit cheesy there. But then you have the Obi-Wan versus him, and the duel there, and then you have the high ground and his legs chopped off, and then he whines like a, you know, I hate you. And it's funny, but at the same time, it's pretty ridiculous because he's lit on fire. So it's a pretty ridiculous scene, but Palpatine goes and does the whole thing. You have the infamous, after that, you have the no scene, which is cheesy as crap. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but anyway, you could have at least had him be like, all right, like, what's next? So I do like the scene with him, Tarkin, and Palpatine looking at the construction of the Death Star. That was a great way to end it there. And then you have Leia on Alderaan, and you have Obi-Wan and Tatooine and all that stuff. So it's a pretty big movie. It really reaches pretty far, and I enjoy Revenge of the Sith overall, despite a little bit of the cheesy stuff and all that. So without further ado, with the last three, I'm going to be jumping into, obviously, if you have not paid attention, shame on you, but I'm going into the originals. I enjoyed the originals the most, like many fans out there, and so I'm going to jump into it. This is going to be controversial, but at number 3, The Empire Strikes Back. I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this, but I understand that, critically speaking, from a movie critic standpoint, this is the best film in the series. And don't get me wrong, I love the movie. But for me, and I said it before, I'm a guy of conclusions. So this is a film with a cliffhanger, so to speak. So by default, I'm going to like it the least of the 3. Me, I'm not much of a cliffhanger guy. Like, if I don't know what happens at the end, I'm just kind of like, it is what it is. But so as a standalone film, I like it the least because of that specific reason. Oftentimes, if I watch The Empire Strikes Back, I immediately watch the Return of the Jedi afterwards. So, anywho, that's that. The Hoth sequence is fantastic. The battle and everything is pretty awesome. It really showed, what I like about it was even though they blew up the Death Star, they're still on the run. So the Empire has all its ships. You see the Super Star Destroyer, and they're coming after them. And you see Vader intensely coming after them and all that stuff. And that was great. So, and then you have Luke learning from Yoda. I think it was like a humbling experience for him, and I like the way they did all that. And the training and all that stuff is pretty cool. And then, of course, the prequels lets you know, like, how intense Yoda is. It's like, whoa, like, you obviously see it in the movie also, but the prequels allow you to see, like, whoa, like, Yoda was no joke back in the day. And then, of course, you have the Millennium Falcon being chased by the Empire. You have the asteroids and all that cool stuff, the big worm, and, this is Low Cave and all that cool stuff. Then it all culminates with Cloud City. You have Lando, who's awesome. He betrays them because the Empire already showed up and everything. You have the whole trap. And then Luke comes because he senses that there's something wrong. He goes there against the best, advice from Obi-Wan and Yoda. But he goes anyway, and then you have, of course, the dramatic fight between Luke and Vader. Vader has the upper hand, but then, it's revealed that he's his dad. It's pretty freaking intense. Like I said, I love the film, so don't get it twisted there. Somebody fall? Yeah, somebody fell. Oh, well. It's pretty intense. And then you have it where Han Solo's in Carbonite, and that's that. So, number 2 on the list is Star Wars A New Hope. I like a Star Wars A New Hope because it set up the story. It's your classic high fantasy, sword in the stone type of thing with the quest. You have the reluctant hero in Luke, who's the small town kid, just trying to, make it big in the city in some ways. You have Obi-Wan, and then you have the droids, of course, being the focus with the Death Star plans, and of course, with Rogue One, you understand all that in the context. You have Leia being captured, Alderaan getting blown up by the Death Star, pretty ridiculous. But more importantly, most people don't tend to talk about this. One of the biggest scenes in that movie, especially when you watch the prequels beforehand, is that Tarkin comes, I believe it's Tarkin that comes in, and he's just like, you know, they're in their little Death Star council and like the admirals and stuff. And one of them's like, oh, you know, we don't want her drawing sympathy from the Senate. And he's like, we don't have to worry about the Senate. The Emperor has just dissolved it. And now there's regional governors in charge. Like, that's freaking huge. That is huge. It's the first mention of the Emperor, so you kind of like, okay, there's a bigger, badder guy than Vader and all these admirals. But that's freaking huge. The Emperor dissolved the Senate. That's no joke. And they're afraid of the Death Star. So, anyway, that's a huge scene. You have them come onto the Death Star. You have, of course, Obi-Wan and everything. People knock the Obi-Wan and Darth Vader fight. Guys, like, watch the behind-the-scenes YouTubes or whatever. Like, the lightsabers were, like, made out of glass or whatever, and they kept shattering. It's a slow, cheesy fight. They didn't have the money to do anything else, all right? It was fresh then. So, obviously, if you compare that duel to, like, you know, Revenge of the Sith or something like that, it's not even going to come close, but it's all about the technology. Anyway, you had the X-Wings and everything at the end with them escaping, but each scene, there's just so many great scenes. The trash scene, the humor, but the most important thing, and this is what kind of stands out the originals compared to the prequels or any of the other movies, you relate to the characters, they complain, they argue, they get into messes, and then they work together, and you just care about the characters. And like I said, it all ends with the epic X-Wing fight, and they all go and storm the trenches to try to blow up the fault in the Death Star, the freaking, you know, whatever, I forget whatever it is, Galen or Urso's thing that he put there to blow it all up, the chain reaction. So they do that, and you have Han Solo come in and like help save the day at the end. You have Darth Vader shoot off into space. And by the way, the robot chicken thing when Darth Vader calls the Emperor is freaking hilarious. I always think about that whenever I watch the end of that. So then they're all heroes, and that's that. And they didn't think they were going to do another movie. But Star Wars A New Hope, that's number 2. And without further ado, my number 1 is Return of the Jedi. Now, I'm sure that's going to create a lot of buzz and controversy. Like, you're an idiot. You like Return of the Jedi, blah. From a movie critic standpoint, it's the weakest in the original, and I understand that. I understand having a second Death Star didn't make too much sense. I think they easily could have solved that by saying, well, we were building multiple to cover different sectors in the, like one for the core region and another one for the Outer Rim. They easily could have explained that, but they didn't. But as you've heard me say before, conclusions, conclusions, conclusions. It is a conclusion. I'm real big on that when it comes to writing. And so it tied in the loose ends. You had Vader. You had Han Solo being rescued on Tatooine. I liked the whole thing with Luke going back there and taking care of business. Luke choking the piss out of the guards was pretty awesome. Like, obviously he's not afraid to use like some kind of dark side type of things. And you have that whole plan that was pretty awesome. In my humble opinion,